Just after 11 o'clock on a Friday night, an airliner is accelerating down a runway at one of the busiest airports in the United States. The crew feels an impact. Smoke begins entering the cabin, and then this comes over the tower frequency.
We just hit somebody. We have an engine fire.
Can you know the souls on board?
We have 231 souls on board. There was an individual walking across the runway. We've got...
This is Frontier Airlines Flight 4345, an Airbus A321 departing Denver International for Los Angeles on the night of May 8, 2026. 231 souls on board, as the captain put it on the tower frequency. The person on the runway was killed. The information we have is preliminary, drawn from ABC News, CBS Colorado, CNN, and the ATC audio archived on Live ATC, the aircraft registration, the identity of the person, and how they reached an active runway have not yet been publicly disclosed. What this raises are some uncomfortable questions about how a person ends up on an active runway at a major international airport, in the dark, in front of a departing airliner. Denver International sits 17 miles northeast of the city, with a footprint larger than the island of Manhattan, 6 runways, and a perimeter fence line that runs for more than 30 miles. Access to the airfield is controlled under federal law, with badged gates, CCTV, and an 8-foot fence line built to TSA standards. The aircraft is an Airbus A321. A single-aisle narrow-body Frontier flies in a high-density fit. On a takeoff roll at near maximum weight, it reaches rotation speed in roughly 40 seconds. By the halfway point of the runway, it is already moving at well over 100 knots. There is no version of this in which a crew sees a person on the pavement and stops short of them. Frontier 4345 was a scheduled service to Los Angeles, departing 17L with 224 passengers and 7 crew. The time per Denver International was just after 11:15 on a Friday night. Surface weather at the moment of the strike has not yet been reported officially. Frontier 4345 receives takeoff clearance and begins its roll down 17L. Somewhere during that acceleration, before the crew reaches rotation speed, the aircraft strikes a person on foot on the runway. The person is ingested into one of the engines. That ingestion is the source of the fire the crew calls in seconds later. A passenger named John Anthons, watching from a window seat, later described it as a spark followed by what he called a big explosion in the wing and engine area. Smoke begins entering the cabin. The crew aborts the takeoff and reaches for the radio.
Tower Frontier 4345, we're stopping on the runway. We just hit somebody. We have an engine fire.
Can you know the souls on board?
We have 231 souls on board. There was an individual walking across the runway. We've got smoke in the aircraft. We're going to evacuate on the runway.
Passengers are evacuated via the slides and wait on the runway for roughly an hour before buses arrive. The aircraft does not move under its own power again that night. The person struck did not survive. Their identity has not been publicly released. But there is a separate question the audio alone can't answer. Somewhere on the airfield, a ground radar system that is supposed to see everything moving on the surface either saw a person walking across an active runway and didn't alert the controllers, or didn't see them at all. Which of those two it was changes the entire shape of what went wrong here. Picture yourself in the tower cab at Denver working local control. On the surface radar display, you have ASDE-X, the Airport Surface Detection Equipment Model X, which paints every aircraft and every vehicle moving on the airfield. When something enters a protected zone around an active runway without clearance, ASDE-X is supposed to fire a runway status alert, visible and audible at your position, telling you to stop the departure. The system was rolled out after a string of runway incursion accidents, and Denver has had it for years. That's one layer. A second sits on the runway itself. At many large U.S. airports, runway entrance lights, a red bar of in-pavement lights at every taxiway crossing, illuminate when the runway is active, independent of the controller. The third is the perimeter, Fence, gates, badging, patrols, sized so that the only people who can reach a runway are the ones who belong there. No single one of those layers is supposed to be enough on its own. They are designed in depth precisely because the consequence of all of them failing at once is what we just described on 17L. Pedestrian runway incursions are rare, but the FAI tracks them as their own category, distinct from vehicle and aircraft incursions because the failure mode is so different. A vehicle on a runway usually has a radio, a transponder, a briefed driver. A person on foot has none of those, which is why the perimeter and surveillance layers carry almost all of the load. Where public reports exist, pedestrians who have reached active runways have typically done so through a forced perimeter breach, an unsecured gate, or an authorized person becoming disoriented in low visibility. In almost every case, more than one safeguard had to fail at once. The FAI and the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, have both opened investigations. By Saturday morning, ABC News was reporting that airport security was inspecting the east perimeter fence for gaps, and that the person did not appear to be connected to construction work on a parallel runway. 4 questions will sit at the center: how the perimeter was breached, and whether ASDE-X generated an alert, the state of the runway entrance lights at the crossings onto 17L, and the timeline between the strike and the crew's stop call. When a person ends up under the engine of a departing airliner, it is almost never because one thing failed. It is because several things, each seemingly minor, lined up in a way the designers thought they had ruled out. Investigators are now examining the aircraft, the engine, ASDE-X playback, tower recordings, perimeter CCTV, particularly along the east fence, and the access path the person took to reach 17L. There is no official cause yet, and no public identification of the person who was killed. The full picture will take months. Our thoughts are with the passengers and crew of Frontier 4345, with the first responders who worked that runway in the early hours of Saturday morning, and with the family of the person on the runway.